when they ask you to come back a second time, you feel like you're okay, you know. You passed the test or something of that nature. But we're happy to share a word with you. And the word is really for me more than it is you, because as life changes and transitions take place, things change in your life too. And when I was younger, I never had this sense of worry that I feel today at my age with my kids and my parents and the situations that we're going through. And so tonight, if you would just indulge me, I would like to speak to myself on worry. When the post office in Troy, Michigan, summoned Michael Acorn to pick up a 2-foot-long, 40-pound package, his wife, Margaret, cheerfully went to accept it. But as she drove it back to her office in Detroit, she began to worry. The box was from a huge, reputable department store, but the sender was Edward Acorn. And he was unknown to Margaret and her husband, despite the identical last name. What if this thing is a bomb? The post office suggested she call the Detroit police bomb squad. 8 squad cars and an armored truck soon arrived on the scene. They took the suspected bomb to the tip of Belle Island in the middle of the Detroit River. They wrapped a detonating cord around it, and what shall we say, they opened it remotely. And when the debris settled, all that was left intact was the factory warranty for the contents, a $500 AM/FM stereo system console. Now the only mystery is, who is Edward Acorn? And why did he send Michael and Margaret such a nice gift? And of course, the moral of that story is that worry is probably the greatest destroyer of peace in our lives. It can rob us. And personally, I've been robbed on numerous occasions by worry. I can give you a description of the thief, but he's constantly changing his dress, his face, and his approach. I love living without him, but every now and again, he forces his way back into my life. Worry can do some strange things to us. He is a thief that keeps taking from us the good things like joy and peace and blessing and stress-free living. I think he even robs our age from us. Psychologist Gary Oliver suggests 5 negative effects of worry. And what made me actually interested in this is he takes these 5 things from the Bible. He takes them from Numbers 13, about the story of the spies. Now, I'm going to assume you know that story. We're not going to read it because really I want to get to Philippians. But we're going to talk about his 5 things that worry causes. The first thing he says is that worry magnifies our problems. It doesn't matter what size they are, it makes them bigger than they are. And you can remember the story of the spies. 12 spies went into the land, 10 come back with a good report, 2 come back with a negative report. And between one verse and another verse, there was just, man, this is the greatest place in the world, and the next passage, worry has just taken over. Worry is kind of like reading glasses. It doesn't matter what size the print is, it still makes things look bigger. And the more we dwell on something, guess what? The bigger it gets. Legitimate concerns become exaggerated concerns. Secondly, Oliver says that worry distorts our perspective. It's amazing how worry can bury all the other good things in life that are taking place. Worry can sidetrack us. It can keep us from thinking logically or clearly. It's a thief of the mind. Remember what had already been reported in Numbers 13, verse 27, when it says, "This was their report to Moses. We arrived in the land you sent us to see, and it's indeed a magnificent country, a land flowing with milk and honey. Here are some of its fruit as proof." Worry stole that truth. It robbed that perspective. Something happened between verse 27 and verse 28, and I call it worry. Verse 28 says, just after they said it's a wonderful place, look at the fruit, this is great, just like God said, but the people living there are powerful, and their cities and towns are fortified and very large. We also saw the descendants of Anak who were living there. And so somewhere between those two verses, it went from really, really good, really, really great, to really, really bad. And thirdly, worry can paralyze us from taking constructive action. In chapter 14, verse 2, we read, "Their voices rose in a great chorus of complaint against Moses and Aaron. We wish we had died in Egypt, or even here in the wilderness," they wailed. Worry can sidetrack us and can sideline us by making us fearful of any decision we make. Worry can keep us from trusting our own decisions by making us feel we cannot make good ones. It can become a kind of what I call voluntary paralysis. Worry can paralyze us. Recently coming back from Texas, seeing some of the people, hearing their stories, many of them are paralyzed, not knowing what to do next. Sometimes this can lead to what we call clinical anxiety. Though most anxiety only lasts a while, this kind can be a perpetual state. Most everyone experiences the first. Some people experience the latter. Fourth, worry drains energy from us. It's a decharger. It saps, consumes physical and emotional energy from us. It's a thief of strength, like a drain on a battery. We waste energy on worry instead of constructively dealing with the issues in our lives or the lives of others. In chapter 14, verses 3 and 4, why is the Lord taking us to this country only to have us die in battle? Our wives and little ones will be carried off as slaves. Let's get out of here and return to Egypt. I mean, worry just paralyzed them as a people. It drains them, saps their energy. And lastly, psychologist Gary Oliver writes, worry tends to make us more impatient. It's the thief of patience. The pressure of the situation makes us want to take things into our own hands. And in chapter 14, verse 10, we see that the whole community began to talk about stoning Joshua and Caleb. Then the glorious presence of the Lord appeared to all the Israelites from above the tabernacle. Worry increases the possibility of being reactive and making unwise decisions. Well, worry can do a lot, can't it? It can even make people sick physically. Well, how do we defeat worry? Well, I'm not sure we can, since it's so tied to our being as fallen creatures. But Paul does give us some ideas as to how to manage it, how to fight it. But I'm not convinced, and it has not been my experience, to be able to actually slay it. I've preached about it all my life, and then every now and again, it'll rear its ugly head in my life. We know that Paul experienced anxiety. We know he had firsthand knowledge of worry. He says, I came to you in weakness, timid, and trembling. We know he had firsthand knowledge of what it meant to worry. But he also gave us probably one of the greatest passages on worry in Philippians chapter 4. And that's where we're going to settle for a while. In chapter 4, beginning in verse 4, we read this. Always be full of joy in the Lord. I say it again, rejoice. Let everyone see that you are considerate in all you do. Remember, the Lord is coming soon. Don't worry about anything. Instead, pray about everything. Tell God what you need. Thank Him for all He's done. If you do this, you will experience God's peace, which is far more wonderful than the human mind can understand. His peace will guard your hearts and minds as you live in Christ Jesus. And now, dear brothers and sisters, let me say one more thing as I close this letter. Fix your thoughts on what is true and honorable and right. Think about things that are pure and lovely and admirable. Think about things that are excellent and worthy of praise. Keep putting into practice all you learned from me, heard from me, and saw me doing, and the God of peace will be with you. Philippians 4:4-9 define this concept of worry and what kind of words of wisdom that Paul imparts. You see, the concept of worry comes from verse 6. Some translations use the term anxiety. Don't be anxious for anything. It's used 19 times in the New Testament. It can also be translated be concerned. So it's probably one of those words that is neutral until you make it negative in life. 4 of the times it's used, it's actually used in a favorable sense. And all 4 uses are given by Paul. Philippians 2:20 says, I have no one else like Timothy who genuinely cares about your welfare. Same term, care, anxiety, worry, same word. And it illustrates the positive use of the word. For me, genuine concern is not the point in this text. We have taken it a step beyond. It's probably best to understand this issue like a continuum. Concern, worry, anxiety. On the healthy end, we have concern. By giving it our continued attention, though, concern can sour into something else, like worry. When we allow worry to dominate us, it can make us sick. The English word anxiety comes from the Latin and the Greek words, which means to press tight, or to strangle, or to be weighed down with grief. And one author states that the word worry means to divide the mind. Well, how does it do that? Well, worry divides the feelings. Therefore, emotion lacks stability. Worry divides understanding. Therefore, convictions are shallow and changing. Worry divides the faculty of perceptions. Therefore, observations are faulty or false. Worry divides the faculty of judgment. Therefore, attitudes and decisions are often unjust and lead to damage and grief. Worry divides the determinative faculty. Therefore, plans and purposes, if not scrapped altogether, are not filled without some kind of persistence. All of those things were true in Numbers 13 regarding the Israelites and the way they faced the opposition in the Promised Land. Whether we are talking about in this passage, I believe it's more than just concern, though. It's that which is dividing our mind, and that's why Paul gives us this text, to bring peace to a mind that's divided, peace to the worry that can enthrall us, encapsulate us, attack us, become a barrier to us. And in this passage, it appears from the context that Paul's exhortation springs from a personality clash between individuals in the church. That's what was causing the anxiety. And Paul says to alleviate this stress from worry, this time of unrest, this time of absence of peace, first, you must begin attitudinally. And that's why we read the passage in verse 4. Always be full of joy in the Lord. I say rejoice. Again, I say rejoice. The only way really to deal with worry is to start with joy in God, not in the circumstances that have caused you worry. We can't always be joyful in circumstances, can we? But we can always be joyful because of God. One of the things my wife and I have enjoyed about attending, we attend the first service on Sunday morning. So I don't know, there's another congregation, I'm assuming the second service, which I've never met. But nevertheless, when we come here, we feel refreshed. We feel peace. We feel encouragement. We feel joy in God. And so we've enjoyed our worship with you. But you have to refocus your attitude in times of worry, no matter what the time, no matter what the circumstance. Chuck Swindoll writes this, and you got to listen carefully to it. One ship drives east, and another drives west, with the self-same winds that blow. 'Tis the set of the sails, and not the gales, which tell us the way to go. Like the winds of the sea are the ways of fate, as we voyage along through life. 'Tis the set of a soul that decides its goal, and not the calm or the strife. So if you start with that attitude first, it will help you in times of circumstances you can't really grasp. In other words, in times of worry, all of us have to reset the sail. Don't let it take you where it wants to take you. You reset the sail. Place it in such a way that God can move you and you might feel His joy. Focus on that which can give you joy, not that which can steal or rob your joy. The second thing Paul deals with about worry has to do with our choices in verse 6. Don't worry about anything. Instead, pray about everything. Tell God what you need and thank Him for all He has done. In other words, always in the midst of any circumstance which causes you some anxiety, uncomfortability, or worry, always bring God into it. That's the last time you want to leave God out. Always bring Him into it. That's what I believe the passage is teaching. Bringing God into every situation always changes the situation. Living on the inside with God is better than tackling the issues with worry without God. It appears as if we're supposed to choose to refuse to allow concern to develop into something that is unhealthy as an individual. Never allow your concern to develop to a point of unhealthiness, because then that is worry that will bring anxious anxiety in your life. We're to choose to change our perspective. We're to choose to refuse to worry, to be our entire focus. We choose to set refocus on God. We choose not to allow circumstances, crisis, or people to erode our trust in God, to whittle away our joy. Some of us sometimes fall too quickly into worry. We're entrenched with it. Maybe this is why Tim Hansel was what he was referring to when he wrote, and I quote, "Pain is inevitable, but misery is optional." We cannot avoid pain, but we can avoid joy. God has given us such immense freedom that He will allow us to be as miserable as we want. And some of us now and then find ourselves into that trap of being miserable. We aren't there often. We try to escape, but worry like a thief is sometimes elusive, and we find ourselves trapped in worry. Concern gone awry. Then it's time to abandon our feelings and start choosing a new perspective. Time to reset the sails. Have a worldview that refocuses more on God and less on everything else. I don't say this as a platitude, but as one who has struggled with concern becoming something it shouldn't. We always have one more choice: to trust God. We aren't as comfortable with that one, though, because we have no control in its outcome. But choosing to trust is a choice. So Paul can say, don't worry about anything. Honestly, I can't think of more difficult words to practice than don't worry about anything. Thirdly, Paul seems to indicate that we can live on a higher plane. In verse 6, verse V, it says, tell God what you need and thank Him for all He has done. In other words, when things on earth make no sense, seek the divine sense. Paul encourages us to focus on our relationship to God. Tell God what you need and thank Him for what He has done. You see, relational stuff, and that's what really is our walk with God, is a relational thing, right? It's relational stuff. It brings focus, different focus than the worry brings. Relational stuff can bring clarity. It's the reason why we talk about things over and over and over again as couples, you know? It brings gratefulness to your life, even when all you've been able to see is concern turned to worry. Relational stuff turns your heart toward home, God's home. And we need to always seek the proper plane to place earthly experiences that we cannot handle and we cannot process. Dave's story is what I would call another plane story. Dave was in his mid-30s with a lovely wife and family. He served, and even after the surgery, the same thing every time he had it. I'm in the hands of the Lord, and He is good. Now, that's a higher plane perspective, is it not? It's a higher plane perspective. This is what verse 8 emphasizes. Now, dear brothers and sisters, let me say one more thing as I close this letter. Fix your thoughts on what is true and honorable and right. Remember what we said earlier about worry? That it can divide the mind, the feelings, the judgments. If it's true that worry can be a distortion, then what's the antidote? Verse 8 is the antidote. Look at your worries in light of what you know to be true. Look at your worries in light of what you know to be honorable. Look at your worries in light of what you know to be right and pure and lovely and admirable. Look at the worries in light of what you know to be praiseworthy. If you do that, then you're basically living on a higher plane. Lucille Goodman of Jackson, Mississippi, reports all kinds of trouble driving to and from work. She says it used to be so easy. There were no traffic problems, no mad rat race, but now, wow, cars are coming from everywhere, every direction. She says it's been that way ever since she got her new glasses. I see you've met Lucille on the road. Verse 8 is our glasses. That's the way we're supposed to see through things. That's the big print glasses. Looking through them gives us some other world clarity. Not this world clarity, but other world clarity. It might keep the thief of worry from lodging in our home. And the last lesson about worry is practice the truth. Verse 9. In verse 9 we read, keep putting into practice all you learned from me, heard from me, saw me doing, and the God of peace will be with you. Verse 9 basically speaks of continuity and repetition. It doesn't look like we can keep worry from the door, but it does appear as if we can take certain actions to keep it from staying in our lives. Every time worry rears its ugly head, put the process in action. Let's review. Begin attitudinally. Start with you, your attitude. Make the right choices. Live on a higher plane. Take a higher perspective. Practice the truth. Remember, these are the three categories of circumstances in our lives. Circumstances we can change or control. Circumstances we cannot change, but we can influence. And circumstances that we cannot change or influence. Things we cannot do anything about. They are out of our control. Elizabeth Cheney put it so simply, and with this I'll close. Said the robin to the sparrow, I should really like to know why these anxious human beings and worry so. Said the sparrow to the robin, friend, I think that it must be that they have no heavenly Father such as cares for you and me. Sometimes we just forget. We just forget the more important issues in life that will bring us peace. For me, my issue of worry has been my parents. My father has accelerated dementia. Today he called me and just gave it to me. He's living with my brother right now. He was here in town till about 4 months ago. And we're just dealing with some issues. And every now and again, he'll just go right off. And so he can't remember things. He thinks we're doing things. And it just troubles me so. Because the relationship's not the same anymore. There's no kindness. There's no compassion. There's no care. The relationship's not there. And you know, there's some things I can't control, but I still worry about them. It still causes me concern for them. And so the reason I brought the message tonight was not for you. It was really for me. But I hope in my particular slice of life, the way I feel, it might help you in relationship to things you're going through as well. Our Father,